So the draw's out. That means footy's back. How good? It's super early, obviously, but they've got things out ready to go. The few of the boys are going to be over in Las Vegas for the start of the season. So we'll get into how that first round looks. Obviously, they're starting on the 3rd of March. So very exciting with that one. Welcome back to everyone here who is a NRL fantasy fanatic or a Supercoach guy. We are here. So a few articles I want to go through. Obviously, we've got Jason Robson's there, Mercado article. We love those. So we'll just drop into that. He's got a lot of just the key details in there that we can discuss in that one. And obviously, we'll go a little bit through the actual draw one by one and sort things out there. So let's just get started with the draw. And it is not so different to last year, which is great because last year was a massive change going out to 27 rounds. So things stay the exact same with that this year. Every team does have 3 buys. So we obviously have the same amount of teams here now that the Dolphins are coming into their second year. So makes things a little bit easier to work out for us. We have some precedents from last year as to how things went. And we can use some of that data in discussing and sort of analyzing and working out what we're going to do in this season. So the second season since all of the new rules came in there. So the 27 rounds, they kick off in Las Vegas there, which is going to be very, very cool there. And we'll just go straight to that now and how that's going to work. So it starts on the 3rd of March. They're both on a Sunday. So it actually starts sort of the week before the actual season kicks off in Australia there. So the Knights come up against the Raiders on Thursday night and they spread those games out from there with a couple on Friday and 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday there to finish things off with the West Tigers getting a bye in round 1. So we don't have to worry about the Tommy Talaus, the Sean Blaws of this year. Happy days. Adam Dewey was the other fun one last year. So yeah, none of those guys will be looking at to start off the season, given they have a bye in round 1. And I really doubt that there's going to be any players here that you'd be looking to hold like we did with guys like Ben Murdoch-Masila last year or Tyrell Sloan that we had on a bye in round 1 last year. So yeah, nothing's going to change with that first round. It's just the fact that after Sunday, we do have the 4 days there to actually make some further decisions with our squads. And given we have unlimited trades during that first round, a few things that you can muck around with and see how things go. Like if any of these Eagles, Rabbitohs, Roosters or Broncos players get injured in their game over there, and then you can make some changes accordingly from that, which is going to be pretty cool. So yeah, that's the big sort of key details there. Everyone has the 3 buys. It's still round 13, 16 and 19, exactly the same as last year, where 7 of the teams will have the buy. And then you have the minor buy rounds as well, which we found very difficult last year to get sort of that 17 on the park, given it's still going to be the same most likely. We'll find out. Obviously, we haven't got all of the details for the NRL fantasy season, but these are just the details for the draw. So if anything changes, we'll obviously get into that, I think, later in December when the game sort of opens up and we get all that news. But for now, the draw has not changed, which makes it a little bit easier for us there. He's got in there the bye structuring, so the origin period between rounds 12 and 21, and then non-origin rounds before that and also after. So he separated a few of the teams there. So guys that have a bye in the first 6, it goes in this order: Tigers, Titans, Dolphins, Storm, Sharks, and Panthers. So our captain's going to be an interesting one as well with the Nico Hines and Nathan Cleary there in round 5 and 6. So Panthers not having a bye early in round 3 this time. I think that spooked a few of us. It definitely spooked me with a few players. The Isaiah Yo's of the world, we just left them out when we really should have been looking at someone like him as a good cover for that entire period all the way through until Origin. So a lot of these guys, it's actually good to sort of get one out of the way early. It's something that we learned at the end of last year when we did our review, is that if you have a player that has a bye in the first sort of 5 to 6 rounds, most likely you can cover them. Because at the start, you're looking to get at least close to that 21-man squad that are all playing. Later on in the year, if you've held these guys, some players you'll hold from the start, or you'll grab them in sort of round 3 or 4 and you'll hold them for the entirety of the year or close to it, that if they don't have their buys until a lot later, you can get yourself into a bit of trouble if you're running out of trades. You're holding sort of a 21st or 20th man that aren't playing week to week. And then you have one of these guys have a bye later on, that extra bye that they could have had earlier on, then you do run into a few troubles. So that's where having one in that first 6 is not actually too bad, because you can cover that fairly well. And we did see a lot of players that did really well in NRL fantasy across the season, that they actually had a few guys in a team that would miss buys early. So it didn't really make too much of a difference. And then obviously the buys in the last 6 as well. One of the teams that we need to have a little bit of a note of is the Knights, given that they don't have a bye all the way through until round 12, and they were a very relevant team last year. So look at them. Everyone else has a bye before that, and then they are able to have sort of all their buys done by round 21 there. Which is going to be cool. So yeah, one of those teams where you look to have them really early and then completely get rid of them in the middle because they're going to miss so many, especially the Origin guys like a Kalen Ponga, and then getting them back in at the back end of the year. So that's just one interesting team so far, which you've spoken about Ponga there as well. The Dolphins are the Eels of last year, so they didn't miss any of the major bye rounds, and they're obviously going to be important at some point. One thing we did notice was that some issues came along in those minor bye rounds where we kind of loaded up a little bit too much with some certain players, and that's something we might want to avoid. And I suppose with the Dolphins, there might not be too many relevant guys come that period, so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we play that one. Are we mixing them with other teams that maybe missed one of the major bye rounds and kind of had a bye early on the year and then one maybe later in the year? That could be the way, rather than just loading up on those guys that have plenty through that middle. And one at the start in round 3 they have there as well. So yeah, that's what Jason was saying here. Just respecting those minor bye rounds is really important. And then speaking about captaincy rule there, and you're looking to probably have at least one of those 2 top guys that can score the best there in that one. So that's the Mercado there. And we'll move to just a couple of things that they mentioned on Fox Sports. Just my initial reaction, guys, and kind of just the general idea of what's going on before we have a quick look through the draw and some of the bye round teams and what we're going to look at there. So they've mentioned here the Sharks have the softest draw for 2024. So they end up playing 8 games against last year's bottom 4 sides, I should say, which is pretty wild. How that's worked out for the Sharks, and we know they play really well against bottom sides, but we do have to note that teams like the Cowboys, we said they had a really, really easy draw coming into 2023 season, and then they played really poorly. So you do have to base things a little bit on the draw. You do have to kind of work out if teams are more likely to be a solid team / a good team straight away, or there's a chance that they could fall off. And you'd imagine the Sharks are going to be staying somewhere similar or maybe improving. So this is a team that is probably worth looking at. And that's where you want to look at guys like Nicho Hynes come out. And after having a sort of a tougher season, especially following from Origin, he's a guy that's going to be really important, I think, to start off the season. So yeah, that's a team to look at. And some other teams that have slightly easier draws, you do have to realize that the easier draw from last year may not be the easier draw this year, and that team may struggle a little bit coming out of the gate as well. Storm have a really tough start. They play a lot of tough teams in there, so yeah, it makes it interesting. The Panthers have a fairly tough start as well. Be interesting to see because they actually struggled to start the season last year a little bit, but I personally do think it was a mixture between them playing so many games over the off season, which has happened a little bit here, but a little bit less. Them coming off a lot of premierships now in a row, 3 that is, and then also just a few changes that they had, especially with that big Coruscant losing him, just making those changes there, and they really built through that towards the end of the season. I think that they will start a lot better in this one, given that they're not making too many changes through the spine there. Other teams like the Tigers are pretty well in the middle there. They're doing solidly there, and then you've got South Sydney who finished really poorly. That have a solid draw as well. The Warriors 4 games and Canberra 7 are the only top 8 teams from this year to not have at least 10 games on free to air, which is a little bit annoying as well. Given that the Warriors were so good last year and they're likely to be good again. So that's just some of the little features there of the draw for guys that matter, I'd say here. So we mentioned the Tigers having a fairly, having that bye in the first round. You're looking at other sort of easier matchups to kick things off. Obviously, Titans and Dragons, you'd imagine to be a pretty solid, higher scoring matchup there with the way the Titans go. So they could be an interesting team to look at for round 1. And we don't really want to go clearly on matchups, solely on matchups there. But to start things off, it'll be interesting to see how the Dogs and also the Eels go. Storm v Panthers is going to be a cracker. Same with the Warriors and the Sharks. Knights v Raiders to kick off their matchup from the finals last year. And And then 2 matchups in Vegas. It's going to be really interesting to see how the players acclimatized to their new arena, to the new country that they're playing in. And will those 2 games be high scoring? Will it be poor footy? Who knows, coming over there. So, yeah, are you going to load up on players over there to then have a big schedule to travel back? There's so many things to think about with that Vegas trip for sure. Is there going to be any partying at all? And you'd hope not, given it's the first round, and I'd say unlikely. But even just the travel in itself, we know can be a big issue. And yes, they have a little bit of extra time, but they do have travel time, which is the big thing there. So round 2, we see a bye for the Titans. So that kind of rules them out of contention. If there's guys that are kind of, maybe pick them, maybe pick someone else, you'd likely go for someone else, given that the Titans have a bye in round 2. So unless they're a real clear cash cow or mid-ranger or a gun, unlikely we're going to pick many of those guns, unless it's for feeder, Tino, obviously, as well. Those types of players there. But Dolphins have an okay start as well. Obviously, Cowboys into the Dragons. Cowboys, we're not sure how they turn up to start things off there. And you've got Eagles coming up against the Roosters. So 2 teams that were over in Vegas. They get 2 weeks off, basically, in between games for them. So enough time to recover, you'd imagine. So does that play too much of a part in your decision making? I'm not exactly sure if that will, to be honest with you there. But then you have Broncos and Rabbitohs playing the Thursday match. So they get 3 days off less than the Roosters and Manly do. So something to note there for those 2 teams that are over in Vegas for that one. So yeah, you're looking at matchups here. This is when Sharks, their first matchup gets a little bit easier. So they had Warriors to start off and then the Dogs from there. So Panthers, you think this would be a solid matchup against the Eels, but with their full team back, with things sort of sorted out with Dylan Brown and Mitch Moses will be back. It's going to be an interesting one to look at there. Round 3, as I said, we see the Dolphins have their bye, and other easier matchups there. Sharks play Tigers, so should be a solid one there for them. And where Nico Hines is a great captaincy option over those first few weeks. We know that Cleary scores well against the majority of teams, but he does come up against the Broncos in this one. And early on in the season, how much is on the line for them? Obviously, that's the grand final rematch. So potentially this one could be, but other games not as much. And especially with a team that has won 3 in a row now and made the grand final before that, their most important time of the year is the later part of the year. They haven't shown a decline yet in the regular season, and they have such a good team. So will this be the year that they do decline a little bit and sort of end up around that 2nd, 3rd, 4th in the ladder? Oh, shocker. But yeah, something to note with those guys. So round 4, you're looking at a bye with the Storm in this one. So yeah, I suppose the relevant players in that one, potentially Ryan Papenhuyzen. We'll see how he ends up price-wise. But if he's back for round 1 and he's fairly cheap, you'd imagine it's just a straight into the squad. Harry Grant, we know, was the gun hooker last year, and we're probably looking to have him in our side. And a round 4 bye, we had Cleary in our teams last year as captain with a round 3 bye. So I think Harry Grant in there with a round 4, not an issue as well. And he had a little bit of a fall off last year, and potentially at least he should stay the same, or maybe have an increase on that one. There, Sharkies play the Raiders, so yeah, solid one for them. It'll be a fun matchup, Warriors v the Knights there. And Eagles a decent one there against the Dragons, you'd imagine, seeing how they go in that one. Rabbitohs and the Dogs. So yeah, some fun matchups along the way. We'll finish off with a couple more rounds there, guys. And the Sharkies in round 5, as we mentioned, Panthers in round 6. So yeah, the big ones obviously is Nico Hines, potentially some other guys, but a lot of them are priced up and don't have a lot of value coming out of them. Very similar to that with the Panthers. You may see, Taylor May come in with a little bit of interest, especially if he can get a little bit of a discount based on what he put out a couple of years ago before his injury. So that's something to note there as well. We'll push all the way through until round 13 now, because these teams in sort of round 7, 8, 9, 10, I think are really, really good weeks to have a bye as well, because you can slot them into your side from round 1, get a lot of good rounds out of them. If they're a cash cow or a mid-range guy, then it's likely you are going to move on from them during that time. And then they're also getting a bye out of the way and not having that in the middle part of the year. It's one less that they have then, if they're a player that you're looking to keep in your squad in that one there. So we said Knights in round 12. Before in round 13, we have a lot of buys, obviously, with the Broncos, South, Eagles, Storm, Titans, Warriors, and Tigers there. So if you're looking at players that, cash cows and stuff that you might want to look at, it's obviously players from the Cowboys going to be very interesting. They have a lot of players that do play in Origin, so there may be some opportunities from a Cowboys standpoint in there. Potentially, if there's any injuries to a lot of these Origin guys, that something could come up during this middle part of the year. But players of interest going to be very, very interesting with Raiders, Horsburgh and stuff. Are they going to be in that Origin squad? Is there any Raiders you want to be looking at? Is there any Dolphins you want in that time? There might not be. We don't know. Roosters obviously missing a few of their Origin guys as well. There's a few things to think about there. Panthers missing a lot of guys. So it could be fairly tough during this period to actually get guys on the park. Like, how many Dragons players do you want? How many Dogs players do you want? Sharkies are going to miss Nicho Hines. Eels, they miss a few of their players as well. So round 13 is shaping up to be a fairly tough one at that. Round 14, you miss the Dolphins, Raiders, and also the Roosters. So at this point, it doesn't seem like those three teams are going to be going to make it too tough for us. But obviously missing plenty of guys in round 13, you're going to have a couple of these guys in our team. So round 14 doesn't look ridiculous at this point, especially given you may not have too many Dolphins, given they have a bye in round 3. Something to note there as well. Round 16, the next big one, we do have the Broncos, Cowboys, so all guys with heavy Origin players in those two especially, and the Panthers, and then potentially the Sharks, with the Knights having maybe a couple as well. Parramatta Eels having one or two as well in that one there, depending on how Hopgood and Junior Barlow they end up in squad. So round 16, I imagine, is going to be a little bit easier, just because you're likely not to have a bunch of Origin players in your team at this point. So where the trouble was in round 13 is though the teams that were playing have all the Origin players, so they're out anyway. So I think round 13 is going to be really, really tough one, but it is the easiest one to plan for, given the fact that we have 13 rounds to do that. Whereas round 16, we're planning from obviously early as you can, but more likely from round 13 onwards, you're getting set for round 16. And that's something to note there, that I think round 16 on the surface will be a little bit easier because those non-Origin bye relevant players will be playing in that week. They're not sitting on the bye. Round 17, we miss out on the Bunnies, we miss out on the Eagles, and also the Titans. So again, three teams there that I don't think we're too stressed about. Like, you're looking at players like Latrell and backing up Cam Murray, these types of players there. Eagles, do you have a DCE in your squad or a Ruben Garrick? That's probably the only real annoyance there. Do you have Luke Brooks in your team at this point? And then the Titans, again, it's more just the Origin guys you'd want in your side backing up. So it looks like 17 won't be too crazy, especially with a lot of the guys you're going to have in your side playing in 16, likely playing in 17 as well. And then round 19 and 20 will finish things off there. And round 19, we lose the Cowboys, Panthers, the Storm, who have some relevant players as well, obviously in there. And the other 4 teams being the Dogs, Raiders, Roosters, and Warriors aren't too much of an issue for Origin players, obviously there. The Warriors is a team we could be carrying a few guys to help cover through that period. So yeah, it looks like a sort of an indifferent, sort of even kind of buy around there, obviously round 19. And by this point, if you're wanting your Origin guys to have that buy in round 19 because they're going to miss it anyway, and then from sort of round 20, round 21, you can look to load up on those types of players to get to your final 17. So that's the round 19 one. Round 21 to finish things off, we have the Dragons, the Eels, and the Sharkies. So this one's going to be a little bit hurtful if you do have Nicho Hines and he happens to get into Origin. If he doesn't get into Origin, likely going to be fine. You'll have Nicho playing in round 19 as your captain, and then round 20 you should be able to have someone of relevance to be able to hit a 55-60 if it's not Nathan Cleary during that time, if you still own him and he gets rested or something like that. So that one, St. George, Eels, and also Sharks, I don't think is too crazy to finish things off. So that'll leave us for today with that reaction. And I said welcome back to all the NRL guys. Great to have you back. If you're hanging for NRL like myself, then this would have been fun to have a look through. And we will delve into it a lot more as we get along. We'll get the spreadsheet together, get the colors going, and sort of set things up, and so you can work out where you want to situate your team from round 1, potentially from round 7, and then getting close to round 13, set things up for the rest of the year. So it's going to be lots of fun once we get there, and obviously have a VB. apparently. Knock off knackers. There you go. Knock off Cobber. So there you go. That's it, guys, for this one. Thank you, and we'll see you later.